Driving out 90 towards the turnoff at Dryden, he came across a hawk dead in the road. He saw the feathers move in the wind. He pulled over and got out and walked back and squatted on his boot heels and looked at it. He raised one wing and let it fall again. Cold, yellow eye dead to the blue vault above them. I want to talk about symbolism, depth, and meaning. Let's begin. No Country for Old Men is my fourth favorite book after Worm, A Practical Guide to Evil, and The Tao Te Ching. You probably watched the movie and loved it, otherwise you wouldn't click on this video. And if you're wondering whether you should read the novel, I'd say the two main differences between the novel and the movie are 1. The prose. Like in this scene where Sheriff Ed Tom Bell finds a dead bird on the road. But even if you're not a prose nerd, the writing gives a tone, an atmosphere that even the best direction and camera work, in my opinion, can't. The theme presents itself in every single sentence in the deliberate choice of words. The second difference is a piece of information that was reducted in the movie from Bell's final monologue, and to me was the last piece of the puzzle in understanding the meaning of this movie. We'll get to it soon. YouTube has a lot of videos about the meaning of the movie, and many of them are really good, but I want to cover one specific point that, as far as I've seen, nobody seems to be talking about. So first, what is this movie about? During a hunting trip, Llewellyn Moss stumbles upon the scene of a botched drug deal. He finds a briefcase full of money. He also finds a whole bunch of dead bodies, but understandably, he only picks up the briefcase. Because he is the good guy, he returns to the scene of the theft to bring water to some dying cartel dude, which gives the cartel a chance to get his car's plate number and start tracking him. Anton Chigurh, Socratic hitman, is sent by the cartel to kill Llewellyn and retrieve the briefcase. While all of this is happening, Sheriff Ed Tom Bell tries to follow Llewellyn's tracks and hopefully save him from the cartel. After some cat and mouse games between Chigurh and Moss, some unrelated hitmen kill Moss in a showdown we don't even get to see. Chigurh kills Llewellyn's wife because he promised him that he would, and Ed Tom Bell sinks into despair over his inability to change the world, or more accurately, stop the change that is taking place. Great movie! But what I just said wasn't what the movie is about, that was the plot. What is the subject that the movie is dealing with? Like all of McCarthy's novels, it's about violence and cruelty and survival in a world that simply does not care. But unlike the other novels, No Country is also about picking things up. It is about taking things that are not yours to take. It's what all three main characters do, actually. So what is common to these three men? All three have guns and are competent in using them, but where does that competency come from? The answer is that all three are military veterans, and the lives that they lead are a direct result of the time they spend serving. When Llewellyn loses his passport in Mexico and needs to return to the United States somehow, he tells the border control officer that he served in Vietnam, naming his platoon. The officer instantly decides to help him, showing and not telling that Llewellyn is revered as a hero. It seems that Llewellyn is capable of holding the duality that governments demand of their soldiers. To be a killer in the war zone, then revert back to being a non-violent citizen when on home soil. His moral code denotes that back in the US, he's only allowed to kill animals and people trying to kill him. When he sees the dead bodies, though, he becomes a soldier again. He picks up the briefcase for no other reason than he wants the money inside and no one can stop him. That decision basically ends his life. If he just walked away, he could live a happy life with his wife, Carla Jean. Except that, in reality, he's kinda shitty to his girlfriend. I mean, the dialogue is very well written and enjoyable, but realistically speaking, girls, if your man goes out in the middle of the night and refuses to tell you why or where, you should consider finding yourself another man. Though Chigurh himself never tells us about his army service, Carson does. That number-oriented hitman, played by Woody Harrelson, he refers to Chigurh by his first name and reveals a deep understanding of him. Carson himself did a tour of Vietnam, and so we can pretty safely make the assumption that they operated there together. Though, of course, other hypotheses are also possible. Shiger does not maintain the same separation that Llewellyn does. For him, the entire world is a killing field. Somewhere, sometime in Vietnam, he had caught on to the understanding that morality is a belief, not a fact, and he stops believing in it. He just goes with the flow of things. He picked up a moral code that makes his life easier, but at the same time makes him significantly less human. And when I say less human, I don't mean because he kills people. Human beings have always done that. I'm saying that he's less human because along with remorse and fear, he loses the ability to feel emotions like sadness and joy. I mean, what emotions does he actually experience in the movie? How do you call this? In the words of Dr. Jones, he who makes a beast out of himself gets rid of the pain of being a man. And yet, Shiger sees this transformation as worthwhile. Before he kills Carson, that is, the only person in No Country that seems to care about or know him, Shiger tries to convince Carson of his perspective. In the movie, he seems smug about it, but in the book, it doesn't seem like Shiger is doing this for his own pleasure or defense, but that he cares about Carson. He doesn't want his only friend to live a lie, even for a minute. Then he shoots him right in the face. Male friendships are just like that sometimes, it is what it is. In a way, I think that Shiger is a more refined version of what Cormac did with the judge in Blood Meridian, a sort of inversion of the morally enlightened man. In the end of both the movie and the book, Ed Tom comes to speak to his uncle Ellis and whine about how hard it all is. But it is only in the novel that he tells Ellis about his time serving in World War II. The main plot takes place in the 80s, so Ed Tom should be about 60 at this point. 20-year-old soldier Ed Tom was tasked with guarding a position. The position was well on its way to be rushed by an overwhelming force of German soldiers, and even though his orders were to stay and fight to his last breath, Ed Tom just ran away. He tells Alice that he always felt like he's stolen his own life, and has been trying to make up for it by being a good sheriff, a good husband, and just an overall kind person. But he does live a life of guilt, and we can see that as punishment for taking something that was not his, I guess? Then again, unlike Llewellyn and Shiger, who seem to have ruined the lives of the people closest to them, Ed Tom doesn't. He's actually a force of good in the world. For that reason, I think his choice was a morally justifiable one, or at least that's what the author is trying to say. More than that, I think there's an interesting portrayal of a hero here. Most of us aspire to live a life without guilt or shame, a life in which we are proud of ourselves, more or less all of the time. But the greatest engine for good in this story is fueled by guilt. I'm still not sure what to make of this. Most of the analysis presented thus far in the video was taken from the book Cormac McCarthy, All the Pretty Horses, No Country for Old Men, The Road. I read it right after reading No Country because that's way cheaper than getting a literature degree. I found this analysis of No Country to be extremely insightful, and it deepened my enjoyment of the book, which is one of the things my friend Schnee tells me that a good analysis should do. But I think we can take it even further. Let's zoom out. The entire story is set against the backdrop of the Tex-Mex drug trade in the 80s. Where do we see things being taken by people who shouldn't be taking them? Unlike what some people would have you believe, the cocaine and cocaine trade are not coming from the Mexican side unprompted. Demand calls for supply, and if the United States population decided to, they could just end the drug trade overnight by no longer buying cocaine, or by legalizing it. In order for it to be lucrative for the cartels to hire people like Shiger to do the things that people like that do, people in the US need to choose to take this drug that on the one hand helps them work unnaturally long hours and have an unnatural amount of fun doing it, but on the other ruins their health and negatively affects the lives of other people. A cocaine habit feels to me like something that should not be picked up. We see a similar pattern with the United States getting into Vietnam, taking many lives with no proper justification and, losing quite a lot in the process. The book on killing goes in depth into how the Vietnam War had a significantly higher rate of PTSD for US soldiers than World War II, for several reasons, one of them being that soldiers were better primed to actually kill, a problem that was not yet solved in World War II. And that taking of a life, that taking of something that isn't yours to take, seems to have some long-term negative consequences on people's psyches. Do you see the pattern, or is it just me? And that, I think, is as far as I'd like to take this analysis within the bounds of what the author might have meant. But can we take it outside said bounds? What about our own lives? Is there something we are picking up that we might regret later? I'll tell you what I'm thinking about. Right now, the greatest minds of our generation are summoning into being something that has never existed before in the entirety of the history of the world. And they are doing it as fast as they can. In a world where intelligence is power, they are intentionally making something stronger than any human being, and we are just watching them do it. I'm not so worried about it killing us Skynet style as I am about some Jeff Bezos think-alike gaining an insanely large share of the world's intellectual means of production overnight. I think that might have some negative consequences. And what will we do when those consequences arrive? Say that we didn't know? Also, this machine that we're using right now to facilitate our communication, that is controlled by people who are not our friends and would gladly have us constantly enraged if it made them more money, which it does. They have picked up their briefcase, but we can still decide what we are going to do about it. That's why the ending of No Country is so important. Uncle Ellis tells Ed Tom not to retire, that things have always been like that people have always done bad things for more power, and that somebody needs to try and stop them. And unfortunately, that somebody is you. Later, Ed Tom tells his wife about two dreams that he had about his father. The first is about being given money and losing it. The second one is about his father riding in a mountain pass in a cold, dark night with fire in a horn. We get the feeling that he's been given something, and it's his duty to keep that thing safe. That even when everything around you seems dark, you need to keep that fire alive. God damn, I love Cormac McCarthy so much. Well, that's all I have for now. Thank you for watching this far. War and its effect on ordinary people is a subject very close to my heart. I wrote a short book describing my visit to Israel in October 2023, focusing mostly on the conversations I had with people there. And what I found most interesting was the way that people dealt with the reality around them, be it a fighter pilot or an elementary school math teacher. As always, you can read it for free in the link below. I'd like to thank Cesna for getting me into media analysis in the first place and teaching me so much about it. Shni for teaching me even more, as well as how to present said analysis. Dan the Learner, Yuval, and Ili the Idiot for their feedback on the beta version. And also, my mom and dad for raising me to love puzzles and books. And a very special thank you to everyone who liked, subscribed, left comments on the last video, shared it with friends. That really, really helps. Until next time, you keep that fire alive, you hear?